After more than 100 days of conflict in the Middle East, we've hit another troubling economic milestone. The oil price was the first to flare up. That made everything in our lives more expensive. Think rising inflation. Now the European Central Bank, the ECB, has seen enough and raised interest rates. At this early point, let's enter Mark Blythe into this chat, political economist from the Brown University in the US. Before we dive deep into this, Mark, your brief first impressions, if you like, when you heard the news.
It was inevitable that some central bank was going to do this. In normal times, it would have been the Fed. They're usually the leaders, but in this instance, it was the ECB.
Mark, perfect. Let me set this up a little bit more and then come back to you, because not everyone agrees that this is the right call. Donald Trump, for one, his new chief of the US Federal Reserve, is under pressure from the president not to raise rates. Kevin Warsh is his name, and he'll chair a Fed meeting for the first time next week. The question now is, will the Fed board follow the ECB's lead? And do they really have any choice at this point? For now, it's the European Central Bank which has set this in motion, raising interest rates for the first time in nearly 3 years. The ECB is responding to inflation driven by surging oil prices that have been a byproduct of the Iran war. In comparison, just look at what the US Federal Reserve has done over the past 3 years. It lowered interest rates step by step, but has recently kept them stable at a significantly higher level than the ECB. Right, we have burning questions for Mark. Before that, let's hear from the President of the European Central Bank on why the ECB took this step.
If you let inflation start running out without control, then it becomes a much more difficult situation to bring it back to the level of price stability that we have defined. So the good decision was actually to raise interest rates, to commit and to deliver on price stability so that people will make their investment decision, their employment decision, their wage negotiations decisions in the light of that commitment to restore price stability, as we will.
Mark, we were warned early on in this conflict in the Gulf that the ripple effects would take some time to spread out. Is this rate hike, in part, a sign the conflict in Iran is starting to put pressure on the real central mechanisms of the world economy?
It certainly is. When you block up the Straits of Hormuz, you begin to realise that it's not just oil. It's naphtha for fertilizer. It's a large chunk of aluminum exports. It's a whole bunch of things that are, if you will, basic inputs into the global economy. And the longer that's blocked up and the longer it takes to open that up, the more that you're going to find these things filtering into prices everywhere. Now, should we get too excited about 2.25% increase in the interest rate? This is not exactly like Paul Volcker in the 1980s raising interest rates to 20%, but it's sending a signal, as Lagarde said, that we're on the case, we're watching this.
First and foremost, then, is this a move made mostly because the European Central Bank fears inflation in particular?
It's also a political move in the sense that, exactly as you noted earlier, Warsh has been elected to not raise interest rates. Usually, other central banks follow the Fed. So you could almost imagine that this is the central bank saying, the European Central Bank saying, lads, over there in the Fed land, you need to do this too. We're going to go first to give you cover.
Yeah, so here we go then. The ECB is the first major central bank, as you say, worldwide to raise interest rates. And as you allude to, what comes next in your part of the world is now the real blockbuster, Mark. The new federal boss, Kevin Warsh, was handpicked by Donald Trump, the president, hoping he would cut interest rates. Now Europe has raised and the world turns to the new man who has barely got his feet under the desk, Mark Blythe, with Trump's eyes fixed squarely on the new man. What does he do?
He's in a hard place because when he wanted the job and when he got the job, there was no conflict with Iran. There was no blockade. So the pricing pressures that we've got, and for the last inflation report here in the United States, 40% of it really is just directly attributable to this conflict. He was in a cycle whereby you could imagine the economy expanding, the supply side was adjusting, the labour market was looking good. Yeah, we can run the economy hot. That's what these guys want to do. We won't show up with more inflation. Inflation's definitely going to come down. That story is no longer credible. So whether he's going to walk into the Fed and basically say, we're going to pretend like it's 6 months ago and cut rates, or whether he's going to go, not at this moment, I think he's probably going to hold rather than cut.
Perfect setup. So the next Fed meeting is early parts of next week. That's for Kevin Walsh to negotiate. Before we talk about that, let's have a listen to what Donald Trump had to say about the man he handpicked and what decision he's hoping for when it comes to interest rates.
Kevin's fantastic, and I want him to do whatever he wants. I don't want to have a big influence on him. But we had a great report. We're doing great. And it's unfair that whenever you do great, they want to raise interest rates. It should be the opposite way. You know, if you go back 15 or 20 years, when you had good reports, the market went up. Nowadays, when you have good reports, the market goes down because they think they're going to raise interest rates. There's no reason to raise interest rates.
Okay, so the president has been pretty transparent. If I've got my cynical hat on, Mark, can I ask, you talked about the political spectre of the ECB's decision here. Can I ask what chances the Fed chief could hold off on an interest rate hike until November's midterm elections?
Well, I don't really have a seat at that august table, but I think that what you're likely to see is no immediate action, and then hopefully we can kick the can down the road a little bit. And as we get closer to the election, then we'll see a cut if the straits are opened, if inflation is back within some kind of range. Yeah, I don't think that he's going to be doing any drastic cuts so far. The really interesting thing in what Trump said there, though, is that there is a legitimate debate to be had about whether central banks, and this applies to the ECB particularly, held the economy back, that they were too concerned with inflation, particularly after the financial crisis. And the result was a decade of very, very low growth. When Trump's first administration was around, he basically berated the Fed to run the economy hot, and they did. And ultimately, you had a lot of job and wage growth that was non-inflationary. So it's not as if he's just completely making this up as some kind of weird thing. The unfortunate thing is he's doing it in an inflationary situation that he himself happened to create.
Yeah, it's worth underlining, soon as you raised the point, because I think there is a natural tendency to think of everything that Trump says as completely self-serving sometimes, but you say there's a point to what he's driving at the moment.
Yeah, whenever you make an interest rate decision, you've got to have an estimate as to where the economy is. And if you think it's at the level whereby if you keep running it hot and keep doing things and pumping money into the economy, lowering rates, etc., that's going to result in inflation, then that's a legitimate call. But you might be further away from that than you think. And a decade ago, that was the argument that people were making. COVID changed that. The inflationary environment of the movement's changed that. But, you know, it's not as if like Trump's making this up on his own.
Yeah, there is part of me that wonders what sort of fireworks we might get, Mark, if the new guy actually raises rates first up.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. But then again, at this point in time, does he feel that he really needs to raise rates? Yes, inflation is up, gas prices are up, there are midterms coming up, but it doesn't seem as if the president really cares that much about it. I think his sequence of priorities is end the war with Iran, and then let inflation subside, and then I'll get my rate cut.
Is there anyone, just as we start to wrap up, is there anyone making a read on the US economy at the moment? You talk about how hot it's running and the president wants it to keep running hot. Is there anyone who thinks that it might be getting dangerous not to raise rates sooner?
Yeah, there are many people who think this, and but it's mainly to do with, for example, the AI build-out, the financial risks of this incredibly concentrated bet and this hitherto unproven technology, the data center construction, the politics around this. There are many ways in which the economy can go off kilter, and it's not just inflation and interest rates.
Last one. Historically, who wins when a president stares down a Federal Reserve chief?
It depends who you hire as the Federal Reserve chief.
And what do you think of the new man then?
I'm going to find out soon. I don't know him well enough to call it yet, but I don't think you're going to see a cut anytime immediately soon.
Mark Blyth, it's been an absolute pleasure. Political economist at Brown University. Thanks so much for taking the time. So what do you make of all of this? Are these new interest rates the signs of a tsunami triggered by the US-Iran conflict? And what would you do if you were in charge of fiscal policies where you are? Will the new Fed chair cave in to President Trump and justify cutting rates? Is that just impossible? And maybe the biggest of all, what will Donald Trump do if the new Fed boss defies him and raises rates? Let us know what you think below. If you like this video, feel free to hit the like button, of course, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. From Berlin, it's bye for now.